If I were to ask the question, what is the best Roblox game, there are a couple of games that I would hear twice or more, but one game that I am almost most certain would be said more than twice is Block Tales, a small indie RPG game that blew up around a year ago, and its relevance over the years has been significant for both the platform and the community. It's pretty common for people to compare popular Roblox games with thousands of players to Block Tales, to basically state that Block Tales is a superior game with superior devs. I've always been against this practice because the intent is almost always malicious and ends up discouraging developers, causing them to distance themselves from any criticism, regardless of whether it is made in good faith or not. If the beginning of this video did not clarify the intent, please note that this is not a video intended to harass the developers. Instead, it is a critique of the current game and why I believe Block Tales is Roblox's most overrated failure. But first, let's talk about the Roblox Renaissance. The Roblox Renaissance is an era starting after the metaverse of Roblox. The use of the term has been popularized around 2024, but the earliest examples that it refers to date back to 2022. Games like Fighting took gears from Roblox and personified them into characters. The Roblox Renaissance is a direct response to the corporate push Roblox was going for around the height of the pandemic. These styles of games were usually inspired by the old, retro feel of Roblox. These games have been highly criticized as a disproportionate amount of these games are retrofitted for the sake of consistency, but this comes at the cost of remaining both loyal and transformative to the source material, causing the cancer of a buzzword, retro slop. What does any of this have to do with Block Tales? Well, you see that Block Tales came from this era, and there is no hiding it, while the style is actually intentional for the story they are attempting to tell. The truth is, this game is a part of the Roblox Renaissance. Now, let's first summarize the basic plot setup for this game. We play as some random guy who chills on their couch all day. When they see on TV that Roblox's Innovation Awards are coming, they decide to go and talk to a couple of people on the way. They talk to a family of penguins and sit next to them during the event. David is then promptly clocked on stage by some random guy who proceeds to try to kill David or something. Luckily, the old-ass penguin with dementia proceeds to teach us how to play the game, and advises us to hit the bad man's device, which accidentally sends us back in time to 2010, essentially creating a time loop, and now we have to retrieve all the sword fights on the height swords. So yeah, pretty unique setup. I wonder how each chapter will play into the other. Oh, they are all basically self-contained stories with little continuity besides the beginning and ending, and some main characters. At least the stories are good, right? Why are you leaving me hanging? The prologue is fine and is good enough for what it is attempting to do with the story. However, this is by far Block Tales' worst aspect. There are several moments in which I have to say, and then to describe the story. There are moments where something just happens because it can occur. It's really frustrating. This can work occasionally, but they do it so often that it genuinely ruins any sort of immersion in the story. Oh, so the Komodo dragon is both fluent in English and has rocket boots. Thank God, what a lifesaver. The second major problem with Block Tales' writing has to be its characterization. Where do I begin? This really affects chapters 2, 3, and 4 the most because they focus on character development. Let's start with the lesser of the three evils, Chapter 2. Chapter 2 has by far the most interesting villain. Too bad they make him psychopathic at the end, because that's definitely not derivative and poorly thought out. Chapter 4 has the same problem, which, in my opinion, is even worse, a 180 that assassinates the character, all in the attempt to make me feel guilty when I know that this character wouldn't have done this if the author didn't choose to make them do this. Chapter 3 is the example of the worst Block Tales has to offer. This chapter focuses on us, the player character, and all of the padding, boring sections, and over-reliance on their artist aside. Our character is not interesting. We have no defining traits, and they are not different from us. The bits and pieces of dialogue we get are so small and useless that they might as well not exist. This felt like the developers wanted to vent and chose to vent through this chapter. I'm now going to subject you to the same torture by venting occasionally throughout the video.
Despite acting like I couldn't care less, I'm literally going through the stages of grief. Please kill me.
Speaking about grief, griefer, how does turning a rebellious, little, edgelord into a walking archetype ruin their character? You may ask. The truth is that there wasn't much of a character to begin with. It's like crumbling up a blank piece of paper, like sure the ingredients for the cure to cancer weren't written on it. But now I can't write on it. Any potential value the paper could have had is gone. Chapter 4 had a great, silly but serious captain who was a cool character. The reveal that there was more to their character was nice as well. The problem is that their crew died, and bro became a paranoid asshole who almost kills their adopted kid. Buckward, they were paranoid he did what he had to. Wrong. Good writers would have made their paranoia into a slow descent, not a quick turn for convenience. A serial killer starts with smaller animals and moves their way up as they get older. They don't start by throwing their teddy bear, and suddenly they're Ted Bundy. That's poor writing being written off as character development. Chapter 3 doesn't need to be further explained. Chapter 1 is an interesting case because, aside from Cruel King, there are no other characters. So, how is the Cruel King? Would it be sad if I said he's somehow the worst antagonist? Bro is rarely mentioned, and maybe NPCs talk about him or something, but that's just bad storytelling at that point. Now let's talk about hatred. Aside from aura farming in your Minscape, Bro is never a looming threat. His presence also gets annoying after like 10 seconds.
I still miss her.
But you know what, I don't miss having to waste my BP on the default card given by Tutorial Terry for our sword. I'm so glad they fixed that. Speaking of abilities, now that I've gone over my problems with the story and the writing in general, how about we pry into the gameplay? Before covering the gameplay loop, let's first talk about the insane amount of padding in this game. Chapter 3 is by far the worst when it comes to this because the ending half consists of like 50 different bosses before hatred. The final boss, the central hall in the corrupted version of Teleman's Manor, intentionally contains an annoying enemy spawn that either forces you to dodge, which wastes your time, or forces you to fight them, which wastes your time. In Chapter 2, there is a final long staircase ascending upwards with enemy spam. You have to do this to access the final boss, with 2 stages by the way. They liked using this technique to waste the player's time so much, they did it again in Chapter 4, but somehow made it even more insufferable with it being anti-dash. What the fuck? The first chapter somehow has the least padding, mind you, and it's the shortest one. Who could have seen that coming? Am I right? Now, let's actually discuss the gameplay. However, first, let's talk about the enemy variety because it is crucial for the experience. This is the only thing about Block Tales that has consistently been getting better, for the most part, though Chapter 1's enemies were so boring and basic that they became annoying after a while. I'm glad to say, though, that throughout Chapters 2 to 4, the variety became better and the enemies became less predictable, more complex, and more fun to play against. Even then, though, I wouldn't describe them as hard per se. I love it when enemies actually use unique gimmicks. It really strengthens the gameplay loop. Speaking of the gameplay loop, you see, some genres of games require other subgenres to support gameplay. For example, horror games and puzzles, or the one that we are covering, RPGs and puzzles. The biggest problems that I've always had with these types of RPGs are that the puzzles are either the easiest puzzles ever, or they flat out make you create a solution to world hunger. I'm very happy to inform Block Tales has made this problem completely nullified. Not only are the puzzles not complex or easy, but they're actually fun, minus when they include actions, because usually they are boring as hell when they include actions. Now that we've gotten past my positives for the gameplay, let's get into the many issues with the gameplay. First up, let's talk about my smallest issue before we work our way up. A dialogue choice action randomly appears for some dialogue and has very little consequence for what happens. This game is extremely linear. Everything happens in a certain order, and this only gives you the illusion of choice. Another issue with this game is the use of puzzles. While the puzzles themselves are good, they are rarely used. The best use of these puzzles by far is in Chapter 4. My only problem is that these puzzles needed to be used more, at least for me personally. Now let's talk about the most unnecessary mechanic items. Items serve a very minimal purpose. They literally only exist to make the gameplay look more complex. items are all the same. They either heal you in the moment or over time, and sometimes they give a status effect. They also make the game too easy, but they also get power crept by Ice Dagger. And only some items are used in a niche way during bosses. Otherwise, there is very little use for them during bosses. Did I mean anything? Speaking of bosses, let's discuss the final bosses of every chapter. Artificial difficulty is when a game attempts to create a false sensation of sincere difficulty that rewards a player's skill, while in reality, it often isn't fair, being overly punishing, adding new mechanics that weren't properly introduced, and doing it with no natural build-up. Now let's talk about the Ancients and Hatred. These two are the most artificially pumped messes I have ever played against. Hatred punishes you if you make a singular mistake by skipping your turn and damaging you in the process, because that makes perfect sense. Of course, this wouldn't be a problem if the frames were for dodging bullshit. And before you comment, skill issue, I have beaten this game on hard mode without upgrading my health, pure SP and BP only with one card, which is the default one you get in the beginning. I have over 20 hours on this game. I am not some random person who has unjustifiably critiqued this game. I have beaten this 8 times, including twice for this video. The Ancients also stalls the game with a mechanic that only works for one boss, which only has 15 health points. I despise this notion that a final boss has to be the most difficult and a more sweaty activity than running a marathon. A boss is meant to challenge a player on everything they've learned thus far. A boss isn't supposed to be the hardest, it's supposed to be a test. A test isn't a test when you aren't using anything you've learned thus far. That's why these bosses are failures. In my humble opinion, the relief you get is unmatched, but the effort put into earning such a feeling far outweighs the flaws forced upon these bosses. The worst part about this is that this can be showcased by Hatred. We literally have to use our ghost potion, which is the best part about this battle. Why they don't stick to gimmicks like this is beyond me, but it's really disappointing to see.
Every time I fall asleep, I dream awful things.
And I wake up crying. We discussed the style of the game earlier, but it didn't feel right to not give it its own section, so I'll make it brief. This game's style is perfect. I love the pixel art so much. I love the retro aesthetic mainly because they actually replicated it and stuck to the style. The characters fit the environment, and the creative liberties taken never feel like they've been taken away from the aesthetic they are going for. They feel like worthy additions. I think the characters match this aesthetic well enough. Overall, the style is arguably the game's strongest aspect. The music is fire and another big positive for this. Now that I've praised all that is left to praise, let's go on with the final rankings. Chapter 1 is a 6 out of 10, pretty average. Chapter 2 is a 6.5 out of 10. Chapter 3 is a 4 out of 10 if I'm feeling generous. And Chapter 4 is a 6.5 out of 10. That leaves this game with an average rating of 5.8 out of 10, which is slightly above average. I don't want you to leave this video thinking I hate Blocktails. I indeed do not hate it. I don't get enjoyment tearing it apart. But at the end of the day, this game has had a pretty clear decline. People both in the reviews section of the Roblox community and the general player base failed to criticize. I want to see this game succeed, but at the moment, this game has a number of flaws that should be highlighted. You can choose to disregard this video. You can say I'm just a judgmental critic who doesn't want indie developers to succeed. You can say I'm a heartless loser who will never find love. And while that last part is probably true, I want to reflect on everything this game has accomplished and failed to accomplish. This isn't an underrated gem, it is an attempt at a passion project that lacks replayability, but has merit. People nowadays don't understand that a game that is always being seen as underrated probably isn't underrated. Blocktails had over 100k concurrent players at one point. Games like Jailbreak never reached this in their heyday. Blocktails at worst is a failure that is loved by many, and at best a mediocre passion project that I can at least respect.
I got no business in it, I got no business in it, I got no business in it, I can't fucking go home. I'm good in fucking Miami.